Now that we've identified arguments, and we've also identified premises and conclusions, we need to put them in order. The actual word order doesn't always tell us the order of argument. Compare these two sentences. Because I am a professor, I teach classes. I teach classes because I am a professor. In those two examples, the words I am a professor in one instance occur at the beginning, and at the other instance occur at the end. But they actually express exactly the same argument. Namely, the fact that I'm a professor is a reason why I teach classes. But contrast both of those with this example. I teach classes, so I must be a professor. The point there must be something like nobody but professors can teach classes. And whether or not that's true, the point here is that's a different argument from the first one. And we need to represent the difference between these two arguments very carefully. In order to show what is shared by the first two examples, but's different from the third example, we put the arguments in what's called standard form. And it's really easy. Basically, you put the premise down, and if there's another premise, you put that down. Then you draw a line. Then you put what I call a dot pyramid. It's basically three little dots with two at the bottom and one at the top. And then you put the conclusion after that. It's also useful, we'll see why later, but it's useful to number the premises and to number the conclusion so that we can refer back to the premise and conclusion with the number instead of having to repeat it all the time. And that's all there is to standard form. You just put down the premises on different lines, then you draw a line, put the little dot pyramid, and then write down the conclusion, and then number them all. That's it. And this standard form accomplishes what we wanted it to. Namely, it helps us show what's common to the first two examples at the beginning of this lecture that distinguishes them from the third example. So the first two examples were, I teach classes because I'm a professor, and because I'm a professor, I teach classes. There, the sentence that's the premise that goes above the line is, I'm a professor. And the conclusion that goes below the line and next to the dot pyramid is, I teach classes. But the next example, the third example at the beginning of the lecture, was, I teach classes, so I must be a professor. Now that means that I am a professor is the conclusion that goes below the line next to the dot pyramid, and the premise is, I teach classes. So when you put these two in standard form right next to each other, it makes it absolutely clear what the difference is and what's in common to the first two that distinguishes them from the third one. No matter how easy, I think it's still worthwhile to do a few exercises just to make sure we've got it straight, because this notion of standard form will become important later.